Hey everybody, this is Joe with Joe's Phenomenal and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be doing a review on Frigidaire's new electric induction range. Whoa. This is their new gallery series range that includes the electric induction. It has convection bake and roast. It has steam clean on it, and it also has air fry. So without further ado, let's get into this. As you can see, the control panel at the top of the range there has all of the controls on it. There's no dials for the individual burners or anything like that. Each one of the burners has its own separate control that's activated through push buttons. And as far as functions on the range, you've got bake, convection convert, air fry, broil, convection roast. There's a quick preheat button. And on the other side, you got your cleaning function. So you got your self clean, your steam clean. You got a keep warm button and a delay start button over there as well. And in the center, you've got your on-off controls, and you've got all your push buttons for individual temperatures and the light button, obviously. On the inside of the oven, you can see that it comes with 3 stainless steel pull-out trays. I've got a 4th tray in there, which is the optional air fry tray that you can get through Frigidaire. And all the way in the back there, you can see the convection fan. We had a chance to run the gallery through all its paces, test all its functions, and we were able to take some notes about all the features we liked, all the features we disliked, and all the features that kind of fall someplace in the middle here. So with this review, we're going to go ahead and lay everything out for you so you can make an informed buying decision. As far as the convection oven goes, we went ahead and did some baking, some convection baking, and a little bit of convection broiling as well. And it turns out that the gallery did a really good job on it, especially on the broiling. If you've ever used a broiler before in your oven, you've probably noticed that you've had to turn trays a lot, flip stuff over, reposition things quite a bit in order to get everything to cook evenly. Otherwise, you get something that's cooked really well done in parts, borderline burned, and in other parts that were basically pretty raw.
It's the same mistake again, it's just raw.
In this oven, the heating element runs all the way across the top of the inside of the oven. So when we did our broils, we had a really even cook all the way across, which is really nice. All we had to do, slid the food in there the one time. We did one flip so we can cook the underside. And other than that, we had a consistent color all the way across, so that was good. As far as the convection baking and roasting goes, we went ahead and separated the meat out on 3 different trays. And we put the racks on 3 different levels, put them all into the oven at the same time. And then we went ahead and just tried to bake them all with them in the oven at the same time. In the past with previous ranges, we weren't able to do them all at the same time like that. You really couldn't put more than 2 trays in there at once, otherwise you were going to have one that wasn't cooked really at all. In this case, we had all 3 of them in there at the same time. We did all the flips at the same time, and we were able to pull all the meat out of the oven at the same time. Everything was cooked through, and nothing was overly cooked at any particular part, so that worked out really well too. The third thing we tried was the air fry. We're actually going to go ahead and link our air fried chicken wings video above right now. That way you can take a look at it and you can see how the air fryer in this oven actually works. Basically, the air fry tray takes up one entire shelf in there. So it's really superior to a countertop air fryer in that you can arrange a lot more meat in the oven at one time. We only put 12 pieces of chicken wing in there, but it turns out we could have doubled or possibly even tripled that up if we wanted to. The air fry function worked really well. Obviously, with an air fry tray, there's no flipping of the meat or anything like that. You basically put your meat in the tray, slide that into the oven, set your air fry, and in our case, it took about 30 minutes, and then we just came back, took it out, and it was done. And our wings had really great crunchy skin as well. One thing to note about air fryers, if you haven't used one before, is that if you're using unprepared products, like fresh chicken wings or something like that you just got raw from the store, you do have to use a little bit of oil. If you don't, you can put them in the air fryer. You're going to get a harder skin, but it's not going to have the crunch that you would get from a fryer at all. However, we're talking about a really minimal amount of oil. With the wings recipe that I linked, there's 1 tablespoon of olive oil in there for the entire order. If I were to try to deep fry that on the stovetop, we're talking about probably a couple of cups of oil. The reason tater tots and french fries and stuff out of the store end up being crunchy is because when they produce those, they actually add a little bit of oil into them to prepare them to be fried. As far as the induction function on the oven, we did a couple of tests. First, we took 1 quart of cold water, poured that into a pan, set the induction level up on high, and checked to see how long it would take to boil that water. In our test, it only took about 2 minutes and 45 seconds on the highest setting, which to boil a quart of water, that's pretty fast. Normally with a gas range, we're talking about probably about 5 minutes or so is what we were doing before, between 5 and 7 minutes, depending on which burner you're using and how big a flame your range actually produces. For our second test, we took a saute pan, put it on the range, and heated up a little bit of olive oil to see how long it would take to get the olive oil in the pan hot enough to start cooking some raw chicken. And it turned out that the pan and oil were hot enough in about 5 seconds to produce a sizzle on the chicken. To me, that's outstanding. And third, we checked the self-clean functions. This particular range has 2 different types of self-clean functions. There's your regular self-clean that takes about 4 hours that most ovens have these days. And there's also a steam clean feature on it as well. The steam clean feature just requires about a cup of water and about an hour or so of time to steam. And the full cleaning of the oven takes between 3 and 4 hours depending. Also, the oven comes with a pretty useful quick start guide and a manual. And if you go through the manual, it'll give you information like cooking temperatures for different types of meat, how long you should expect to have to cook them for, cleaning and care information, all that type of stuff is in there, which is pretty typical of any user manual for one of these. I did like that I had cooking times for different weights of different types of proteins in there. That was pretty nice, but it's also something that I would kind of expect for something like this anyways. All right, now for the nitty-gritty of the review. How good is the range? All the bake and the broil functions are excellent. The heat disbursement inside the oven is great, especially if you're running the convection fan. But then again, if you have a convection oven, that's what it's for. So really, every convection oven I've ever used has always produced a really even temperature all throughout the oven, so that's pretty par for the course. The air fry function, that is pretty much a must-have as far as I'm concerned on this. I've had air fryers in the past and I didn't like them. I ended up returning them because I always thought that they were too small, and to produce any amount of air fried food, it would take 2 or 3 or 4 times through the air fryer, and then you had to worry about keeping everything hot. Stuff wouldn't be crunchy anymore because you would have it sitting while you're waiting to cook more, or you just have to serve stuff out as you go, which is basically just a big pain in the butt. This has a tray that's big enough to pretty much fit everything you want to cook on there all at one time. And technically, if you wanted to do more, you can always get a second air fry tray and run them both at the same time. The results were excellent. The cleanup is very easy. And for the first time, I have an air fryer that I actually wouldn't mind using on a pretty regular basis. So that's a big, big plus. On the self-clean features, the regular self-cleaning on the oven, that's pretty typical. It took about 4 hours for it to do a full self-clean. It takes all the built up gunk inside of your oven and it will superheat it and turns it into a fine powder, and then you just kind of wipe it out at the end. That worked really well. The steam clean feature, little bit of a different story. I'm gonna go ahead and say that's sort of gimmicky. We did the steam clean, tried it twice. It does sort of steam clean the inside of the oven, but it didn't get off anything that was stuck on there. It didn't really make a huge difference, except taking an hour out of my day to wait for it. And when the steam clean was done, you still had a whole bunch of water sitting in the bottom of the oven that it didn't convert into steam. So now you're in the situation where you're having to clean the oven after you clean the oven. So if you're getting it for the steam clean feature, I would say don't get it for the steam clean feature. Now for the induction cooktops. Induction is awesome. If you have ever used an induction cooktop, it's a treat. Basically, in a nutshell, instead of using heat like you do with a traditional electric range or a gas range, it's using magnetism. So all your pans that you use have to be magnetized pans, which you can very easily check by taking a magnet and trying to stick it on the bottom of your existing pans. And if it sticks on there, an induction range will work with it. If it doesn't stick on there, then it's not. Also, a thing to note is that if you have a pan that's warped in any way, shape, or form, the warped portions will not heat on an induction cooktop because it has to be flat. It has to make a smooth, flat contact on there. That way, if it's bowed in, it would cook around the side and not the middle. If it's bowed out, it would cook in the middle and not around the sides. That's just something you have to think about. So if you've got older pans, or you know you got one that's a little bit wobbly and warped, you're gonna have to think about possibly having to replace those. Also with induction, it can be a little bit noisy. It's not the actual induction cooktop that creates the noise, but it's the vibration. The way it heats is by vibrating the iron molecules in your pan. So the more different kinds of material you have in your pan, the more it's going to vibrate. So if you've got a pure stainless steel pan, it might not make quite as much noise, but if you've got something like a 5-layer pan that's got aluminum and copper and stuff like that in there, as well as the stainless steel, those tend to be a little bit noisier. Also, if the handles are a little bit loose, it's going to vibrate the handle and you're going to hear it. In my case, I use 5-layer pans, so if I have the power cranked way up, I can hear the vibration until the pans reach a certain temperature, and then it kind of goes away a little bit. But it is a little bit noisy. For me, that's not a problem, but for other people, it might be a little bit of a problem. It just kind of depends on the pans you're using, depends on how flat your pans are. The experience you have is going to depend on a few things based upon what you own and what the condition of what you own is in. But in our testing, induction is amazing. It cooks very fast, cooks very even. And one great thing, since it's not actually using heat, the surface of the oven doesn't heat. The only heat that gets on there is the heat coming off the pan. So some of the information about induction is false, because some people I've heard will tell you, yes, you turn on the induction and then you heat your pan up, and if you take the pan off and touch the thing, then it's not going to burn your hand. Well, if you put a pan on there and you heat the pan way up and then you take the pan off after 10 minutes, well, all the heat on the pan is going to transfer to the glass on the induction cooktop, so it is going to be hot. If it's hot enough to burn you, yeah, probably if you leave your hand there. Duh. It's not going to be like a burner that's turned on or anything like that, and the heat's not being produced by the induction cooktop. It's being transferred back from the pan onto the surface. But that's one thing to remember too, that it's not going to be cool to touch if you're just taking a hot pan off of there. By the way, if this is your first time here and you want to learn some cool new recipes, get some great cooking tips and tricks, and all sorts of other kitchen related things, then start now by subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell so you never miss a thing. One great thing about these though is you notice that there's several circles here on the heating elements. So you basically put the pan down and it's only going to turn on the area where the actual pan is and leave all the outer rings off. Another great thing is that although the pans do transfer heat back to the surface, it's a flat surface, so cleanup on an induction cooktop is fantastic. It's just a soft, soapy cloth that you can use and you can clean it right up. There's no having to take grates apart or anything else. It's all just one piece. You do have to be a little bit careful though, because it is a glass cooktop, so you can scratch it. If you're using something like cast iron on it, I'd recommend taking a little paper towel or something and setting that down on the induction cooktop and putting the pan on top of that, especially if your cast iron has got little burrs and stuff like that on it, because you will scratch the surface of the thing. One critique we have about our induction cooktop is, as you can see, it's very, very hard to see the markings for the heating elements. They really could have used maybe a lighter paint and stuff like that for that, but it's gray on the black surface. So it can be really hard to see that. It looks a lot harder on the photographs to see than it actually is. It's not quite that bad, but there are times where I'm kind of looking at it, and if I'm in the middle of cooking something and I've moved the pan off of the center, I'm not quite sure where it's at unless I kind of look at it for a second. So that's something to think about. They really could have designed that a little bit better, I think. Also, the controls on the control panel, sometimes you have to push them a couple of times. It takes a little bit of pressure to turn certain things on and off at times, and that can be a little bit annoying. It's nothing that I would not buy it over or anything like that, but again, they could have done that just a teeny bit better. I think it just kind of feels a little bit on the cheap side, but it works, so there's that. The only other function it has on here that I haven't talked about is the convection conversion, and basically what that is, if you use that, it will automatically convert temperatures that you would use based upon whether you're just baking or convection baking or roasting or convection roasting, because cook times change if that fan is turned on. I'm not so sure about that. I'm not a fan of doing that and letting the oven make that conversion for me. I would just as soon do that myself. It may work pretty good. I don't know. It's just one of those things where some things you need to kind of control yourself. And I'm thinking that if I leave it up to the oven for that, I'm not very confident that it's going to do that job perfectly well, especially considering everything's not just based on weight, it's going to be the shape of what you're putting in there and everything else too. So that could end up making you have a really bad day. I don't know, if you try that out and you think it works really good, just let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to hear about that. One additional thing that you might want to think about is that you're going to need a 220 plug back behind your stove in order to plug this in, since it is electric. Therefore, if you have gas heating there right now, you're going to have to get somebody in to put that in for you. So in a nutshell, the convection function works very well for both roasting and baking. The air fry function is basically a must-have function for this thing because it's just awesome. I love that. And as far as the induction cooktop, excellent. As far as the function of it, works really well. Like I mentioned, there's the noise, but that's more determined by your pans and not the actual range itself. The markings for the induction cooktop, which really could have been a little bit darker, or a little bit lighter actually. And the buttons on the control panel could have been a little bit easier to press and a little bit more responsive. But other than that, I would say none of that stuff would be a deal breaker for something like this at all. Especially considering a convection oven with an induction cooktop and an air fryer in it is not a very easy to find combination right now. And as far as what I could find that was available, the Frigidaire Gallery series is the least expensive of all of them. We got this thing about $1,300, so I mean, that's pretty fantastic. Just a little heads up, this review is not the result of Frigidaire reaching out to us or anything like that. We did our own research, decided what ranges would fit into our price range, went out, bought our own range, and this review is just based upon what we bought. We based our purchase on other reviews, on past reliability with Frigidaire, the features they were offering, and some other things like that. So no kickbacks from Frigidaire or anything on this. If you'd like a little more information about this range, we do have an Amazon link down in the description of the video, so you can check that out if you'd like to. Also, if you'd like to know a little bit more about us, you can check out a couple of more videos, or you can check us out online at joesphenomenal.com. If you have any questions or comments about our range, we'd love to hear from you down in the comments section. We do our best to answer every single message that comes in, so if there's anything you'd like to know, rest assured we will answer that if we can. We thank you so much for watching this video to the end. Once again, my name is Joe, and we hope you have a phenomenal day. Take it easy.